Hello, and welcome to Federal Flash, the Alliance for Excellent Education's video series on important developments in education policy in Washington, D.C., in 5 minutes or less. I'm Rachel Bird-Niebling, and I'm joined by Jessica Kardashian. This week, the Road to Regulation of the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, found its way back to the Senate with the Education Committee holding another ESSA implementation hearing. The hearing focused on the U.S. Department of Education's proposed ESSA regulations and featured testimony from the Kentucky Commissioner of Education, researchers, and practitioners. Jessica, what are some highlights?
The hearing raised similar issues to those raised when U.S. Secretary of Education John King testified before the committee earlier this summer. First, witnesses voiced concern that using a single summative score to measure a school could mask subgroup performance and the root causes of low performance, and would not provide actionable data for schools or stakeholders to make continuous improvement across all schools. Witnesses also raised concerns regarding the ESSA implementation timeline. Under the department's proposal, accountability provisions would go into effect in the 2017-2018 school year. Witnesses questioned whether such a tight timeline would allow for meaningful consultation with stakeholders to create a state accountability system and to get buy-in and support for that system with stakeholders. Chairman Lamar Alexander echoed the concerns of the witnesses regarding both the summative score and the timeline for implementation. You might also recall that during the last Senate ESSA hearing, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut raised concern regarding the department's approach in the proposed regulations to the issue of end size, the minimum number of students needed to trigger the law's accountability and reporting requirements. This week, the Alliance for Excellent Education and more than 30 civil rights, disability, and data-focused organizations submitted comments to the department urging them to decrease its proposed end size threshold from 30 to 10 students in the final ESSA regulations. The letter acknowledged that the department's proposed regulations include a number of important protections for traditionally underserved students, but said that those efforts would be significantly undermined by an end size of 30 students. As the letter reads, quote, "One of the most important equity-focused provisions of ESSA is the requirement for schools with consistently underperforming subgroups of students to be identified for evidence-based targeted intervention. An unnecessarily high end size would circumvent the intention of the law under the pretext of protecting student privacy and statistical reliability," end quote. The comments can be found at the link below.
Thanks, Jessica. There's also a relatively high amount of legislative activity happening in both the House and Senate in advance of the upcoming extended August recess. Senator Murphy and Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont introduced the Stronger Together School Diversity Act. The legislation is based on a proposal included in President Obama's 2017 budget request and will create a $120 million grant program to help schools diversify along racial and/or socioeconomic lines. Funding would be used for evidence-based strategies for increasing diversity and decreasing isolation, such as revising school boundaries and establishing public school choice zones, creating magnet schools, changing school feeder patterns, implementing weighted lotteries, or entering inter-district agreements. These efforts are in large part a response to the recent Government Accountability Office report showing that the number of children attending schools segregated and isolated by both race and income has increased over the past 15 years. The same bill was introduced in the House by Representative Marcia Fudge of Ohio.
Also in the House this week, the Appropriations Committee passed, along party lines, its bill to fund the Department of Education in fiscal year 2017 by a vote of 31 to 19. The bill makes a huge $1.3 billion cut in total funding for the U.S. Department of Education, and as Representative Nita Lowey, the ranking Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, stated, the bill, quote, "stands in stark contrast to the bipartisan bill that our colleagues in the Senate passed," end quote. It is increasingly unlikely that the Senate and the House will come to an agreement on education funding for fiscal year 2017. The most likely result will be a continuing resolution in the fall, which would maintain current funding levels, followed by additional legislative activity after the election or possibly even into 2017. The House Education Committee also passed 5 bipartisan higher education bills this week. However, according to ranking Democratic member of the committee, Congressman Bobby Scott, it may be next year before the House gets around to further action on these bills.
The House and Senate will begin their summer recess next week, so unless there is breaking news, we will be bringing you updates less frequently for the remainder of the summer. For an email alert when our next episode is available, email us at alliance@allfored.org. Thanks for watching.